Welcome back, everybody. It is Silver and Black today, the Mailbag edition, Raider Nation Mailbag, because you got a lot to say, a lot of questions for us, and we're here to answer them because we're full service. He is Moe Moten. He is a national NFL writer for Bleacher Report, also the Raiders columnist up on Sportsnot. I am Scott Branson, your host. You can also catch up my work, not mustard, but catch up my work on Sportsnot as well, where I write about the Raiders in my weekly up and stocks down column for Raiders players. So make sure you check that out. We appreciate you guys being here and subscribing to the podcast, watching us on YouTube, wherever you're joining us. Doesn't matter. We got a big tent and we want you all inside. So thank you for joining us. Mo, we're back to answer questions. We had so much fun last week with the Mailbag show and some of the different questions, even food-related questions. Of course, we start out with the football and the Raider-related questions from all over the world. We don't have international questions today, but we got some good ones. Are you ready? Because now everybody, it's a fever pitch, my man. It is week 1 of the NFL. We are just a few days away, and people are itching for some real Raiders football.
We're in regular season form, and I'm ready for it.
All right. Now, we move on. But before we move on, I want to say, get your question to us. If you haven't sent one in, do not be shy. Take our hand. We'll walk you slowly. Just come on in. Doesn't matter how much you know about football. All that matters is you're a Raider fan, you're part of Raider Nation, and you want to talk about the team coming up or whatever else you want to talk about. We'll answer any question within reason, I think, that doesn't get way too personal, of course, because, Mo's food takes are not, he shares those with the world, so we can talk about those, as well as I will talk about music all day long, too. So we just go all day. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to talk about. So we're going to start off with that, but we want you to mail us, and you have to do that. You just send us an email, mail@silverandblacktoday.com, mail@silverandblacktoday.com. We give away a free sticker, and yes, I've already heard from some of you that got a free sticker or a T-shirt. It takes a couple of weeks to get out to you. Got to order the stuff, and they send it to you right from there. So it should take 3 to 4 weeks to get to you. Stick with us. You will get it. But you get a free sticker for every question we answer. And then if you get picked at the end of the show, then we will send you a free show T-shirt. So do that. That means you got to put your name, address in the email so we can mail it to you. All right. Okay, Mo, let's jump in now. And our first question comes from one of our best listeners and viewers on YouTube. And I know as he's watching it right now, and he's in the chat there with you and I don't even have to look. And that is our good friend Alan. He goes as Raider27R, the number 8 TR27. Mm-hmm. And he is in Heber City, Utah. So he's one of our West Coast guys. And here's what Alan says. He says, "Hey guys, love your show and have for a long time. You guys helped me through a rough time, and I appreciate that." Not sure what that is, Alan, but thank you. That means a lot coming from you. We glad you were entertained, and we're glad you're past it. My question: the NFL allows a 53-man roster. The owners pay all of those players every week. Why are only 46 allowed to dress for game day? They keep talking about player safety, about how many players are forced to play hurt because the replacement couldn't dress and play if needed. Thanks for all the good work, and God bless. That's Alan, Raider 27. Mo, so the 53-man rule, you can only dress 46. Do we know why that is?
I think it's just a rule that the NFL just rolls with because there's not enough pushback. But other people have brought this up. Like, why not expand the active day rosters with all the injuries? Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is, again, there's not enough pushback, or the NFLPA just hasn't pushed enough to say, okay, we need to expand these rosters because of injuries or illnesses or whatever. But what I think happened is during the COVID year, if I'm not mistaken, they expanded it because, players were not able to play and dress because, day of the kickoff, a player or two or a rash of players would come up and be ill and then they can't play. But I think now that, not to say we're over COVID, but we don't have as many COVID-19 cases as we did in 2020. Yeah. And we're not going to have as many as we had in 2021. So I think as we get further away from that, and the cases lessen, unless there's a spike during the season, you're not going to see the active roster number change very much.
Yeah, it's interesting too, his point. And Alan, I honestly don't know the question, and we did get your question in advance of the show, but just didn't have time to look it up. But I will, which is the owners having to pay who's on the active roster. I think they might have to pay them, but it's not the same as a game check. So I don't know if there's a difference between that. I think there is. I think there's a difference. So if you're one of the non-active players, I think there is something that they have to give you based on your contract terms, but you don't get a full game check like everybody else. But I'll double check. I could be wrong on that one. But absolutely, I think that the NFL and how they do that. But they just went through the collective bargaining again, Mo, with the new agreement. So I don't think it's going to change. But it's a good question that we will get a better answer to. But I don't see it going away.
Yeah, I agree there.
Yep. Okay, so Alan, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Raider27, who I'm sure is in the chat, and if I know the answer, I will. If I find the answer between now and before the show ends, Alan, I will put it into the chat there. Okay, now we go to another longtime listener and viewer on YouTube. That is Eric Kirshner. Eric didn't send me his address. Eric, you gotta send me your address again. Can you list the top 3 reasons why? I love these loaded questions. The top 3 reasons why Raiders won't make the playoffs, and the top 3 reasons they will make the playoffs. Mr. Moten, I will turn this over to you first.
Yeah, put me under the beam first. All right, I'll give the bad news first. And we went through this kind of on the prediction show, if you've listened to that show that came out on Tuesday. Top 3 reasons Raiders won't make the playoffs. Their offensive line stinks. And I think that's the top concern of most fans. What's going to happen at right guard? Is the right tackle position going to hold? Again, I'm higher on Jermaine Illuminati than most, but some people still have their concerns there. Their center position, as I said, Andre James, is he strong enough to go against guys like DeForest Buckner and Aaron Donald? I have my doubts. The other thing is their secondary. I'm high on Nate Hobbs. If you've read my articles on Sportsnot, on Bleacher Report, you know that I think Nate Hobbs is probably going to move outside in base in the slot for the nickel, and he'll play fine because he played outside at Illinois under Lovie Smith, who's now the head coach of the Houston Texans. But I am not high on Rock Ya-Sin. I have my doubts there. I've watched a little bit of him. He was in Indianapolis, and he's been benched multiple times. And it's not because he was a rising star. It's because he has some issues with his hands. He also has issues locating the ball and playing the ball. So you're not going to see a lot of interceptions there. So if you need a turnover, Rock Ya-Sin is not the guy to depend on there. So they may have to rely on some 3-and-outs if they can't get any turnovers. The other thing I could see probably happening that could be an issue if you're looking at a third reason they don't make the playoffs is Patrick Graham. And I know I like to hire Patrick Graham as a defensive coordinator, but I've mentioned this on multiple shows. He doesn't have a long track record. So he's still a young defensive coordinator in a sense. Now, in New York with the Giants, and I watched this, sometimes his schemes got complicated. And we all know when you have a complex scheme that could wear on communication, that could hurt communication on the field because you don't simplify it and guys have to communicate. You move here, I move here. When this happens, we do this. A lot of things can get mixed up in communication. That's what happened with the Giants and why his defenses weren't top-notch every year. Now, he had time with the Dolphins. I had 2 years with the Giants. I know he had a rebuilding team with the Dolphins and Giants, but I believe he had one top 10 scoring defense. So when you have a complex game and he likes to say it's multiple, sometimes things get crossways and you have issues. So he would be the third reason. If his message doesn't translate during the season as he's adjusting and he has to simplify things, there could be some problems there. Top 3 reasons Raiders make the playoffs. As we all know, they have a strong passing offense. Derek Carr, I've said this multiple times. I think he's going to have his best statistical year of his career. I could see him coming. I don't think he's going to throw for 5,000 yards, but could I see 4,800, 4,700? Sure, but I think they're going to have a more balanced attack. Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, assuming he's on the field and gets his new deal, Hunter Renfrow, they're going to have a top 8, 7, 6 passing offense. The other thing, I think the rushing attack is going to be a lot better. Josh Jacobs, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, Brendan Bolden, those guys can all do different things. Last year, they were one of the worst teams running the football. I think they'll at least be in the middle of the pack this year, assuming their right guard and left guard positions and the center positions, the interior holds up. The ground attack should be decent. So I think that balanced attack will help them beat a lot of teams because, as you know, if you're going to be a playoff team, can't beat a team just one way. You have to have multiple ways of winning. The last reason they make the playoffs, their pass rush. We talked about this during the preseason. Behind Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, they have Deshaun Barra and Malcolm Kuntz. I think Malcolm Kuntz is going to have a big second-year leap. I'm not worried about the Raiders' pass rush. I'm worried about their secondary and that young cornerback group. But if you can get a pass rush, you'll help the young guys on the back end, and you'll win games with your defense. And I think the Raiders are going to have to do that because, again, as a playoff team, you need to be able to beat teams in multiple ways.
What Mo said. No. All good stuff. No, and Eric, it's good. And Mo, I think we have some similarities there. When you think about reasons they'll make the playoffs versus they won't, Mo encapsulated some of them related to my take on it as well, including a little bit of a riff on some of it. And that is, I'm going to start with why they make the playoffs. They make the playoffs because of the offense. Mo just talked about it, the weapons, the ability to move the ball around, and the ability to really keep teams off guard with the amount of weapons and the quarterback that they have, right? So Derek Carr, being experienced, going to have a big year. I agree. He's going to go off. I really think it is like Mount Vesuvius ready to explode, and I think that's what Derek Carr is going to do. Second is, I think the defense is going to be better. We talked about, and Mo just mentioned, the pass rush with Chandler Jones and with Max Crosby. I think you see it there. If the young secondary, which has always been a question we've talked about on this show since the beginning of the summer, if they come along and can play well mixed in with those vets, if the guy that Mo isn't too sure about, Rocky Sin, can be what people think he can be, then suddenly the back end of that defense makes it a strength, which helps that pass rush even more. And then third reason to make the playoffs, simply coaching. And I mean that from Josh McDaniels down. I think Josh McDaniels, as we talked about over the past several weeks, he's got the focus, the discipline on this team. They're performing differently. There is a business attitude in that building, and it permeates all of it. And so I think that's the third reason. Why they don't make it, offensive line, of course, Mo just completely talked about it, so I'm not going to go into detail, but definitely that. Number two, the defensive line. Inside, I just don't know if they're going to be able. It's been a problem for the Raiders for the last 4 seasons, and I think that if they can't find, if Bilal Nichols doesn't perform with the way he think he can, or if they can't find some solutions there and they don't get what they need in the middle, because you win in the trenches. The offensive line's an issue. Defensive line, yes, you have the 2 pass rushers, no question on the edge, but I'm worried about the center. Third is the schedule, and I know you can't look. The schedule is what it is. But I think the mixture, and I don't just mean, Mo, the schedule overall, which is tough, but also the AFC West. With everybody getting better in the division, it's going to be tough. In our prediction show yesterday, I talked about that and how at the end of the season, I thought that they would have trouble, but yet get into the playoffs. It could also very well mean that they don't. And so it's going to be tough on the Raiders, not saying they can't overcome it, but if they don't, I think that could be a contributing factor. So we were in the same ballpark on those two, Mr. Moten, but I do think that winning in the trenches is going to be a big one. And then if the offense performs like we think it can, it will be great. And Josh McDaniels calling that offense, I like what he does.
I really like your point about coaching with Josh McDaniels, because what have we harped on? I'm surprised I left this out, but what have we harped on over the summer? Josh McDaniels, detail, focus, not making mistakes, not unforced errors. The Raiders have not, I know people say it's just a preseason, but Raiders did not turn the ball over in the preseason. They dropped their penalties, I believe, in every game. I believe they made out with fewer than 16 or fewer than 18 penalties in those 4 preseason exhibition games. So I think that focus and not beating yourselves and learning how not to lose, that's the difference between an 8-9 team and a 10-7, 11-6 team. And I think Josh McDaniels bringing that mentality in. Look, we're not going to beat ourselves. It's going to really help the Raiders in the win column.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, I like what's going on there. Again, the pause that I have is that, look, you don't build Rome in a day, so to speak, an old saying, right? Which is this team is on the right track. I like what they're doing. There's still some holes. Every team has some weaknesses. There's a couple that come to mind that are pretty weakness free. But overall, this Raiders team is headed in the right direction, and I don't think they'll be without challenges. But Eric, I think those are the reasons why they don't make the playoffs. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here in our mailbag show. When we come back, we're going to get to the rest of the questions. Some great ones coming up, so don't go anywhere. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. If you don't, get your buddies, your friends, your family, everybody to subscribe to it. Our families do. Surprisingly, but they do. No, just kidding. They do, and so we appreciate that and the support. Also, if you're on YouTube, thank you for the chat. It's, again, always lively. We have a bunch of fun in there. If you're not there, get there. It's fun trust me, you mix it up. We got great personalities in there as well. So do that. Hit the notification button as well. You're listening to Silver and Black today with Moe and Scott. We'll be back right after this message. Welcome back. This is your show, Silver and Black today. That's right, because you are directing it today. You have sent in questions and comments for my co-host, Mo Moten. I'm Scott Branson. We are here talking Raiders football. And again, blown away, Mo. I love these questions. Always stuff that comes up that I don't think about.
Yeah, because the fans are invested in this emotionally more than we are, and on the emotional side.
Sometimes.
So they're looking at this from all angles, but we do appreciate that because it's fun to have these conversations on the Mailbag show.
Yes, absolutely. All right, we go right across the way from you, Mo, out to Union City, New Jersey. And Patrick has this question. He says, hey, Mo and Scott, I've heard a lot about the Raiders offensive line this offseason, and they didn't really do much to address it. They're playing with fire, but I remain optimistic. My question is this. If the team doesn't sign anyone else, how confident are you they can make it into the playoffs with who they have on the roster? Which we asked the question about how they make the playoffs. But Mo, that offensive line, I think most Raider fans that I've heard from are concerned and know it's an issue. They just don't know how much of an issue it is or how they should consider it when they think about this team being a playoff run. How much of a question mark is it when you look at a team like last year, like Cincinnati, who made it with a pretty poor offensive line too?
Right, and I've answered that question a lot of times. People have said, well, Joe Burrow did it, and Bengals got there with a poor offensive line. Why can't the Raiders do it? And my answer to that question is, do you want Derek Carr getting hit 70 times? Derek Carr is 6 years older than Joe Burrow.
Yes.
Just because Joe Burrow, right, and just because Joe Burrow made it through the season and into the Super Bowl, getting sacked 70 times doesn't mean Derek Carr is going to have the same result. It just doesn't work like that. But to answer the emailer, my concern level with this team making the playoffs with the roster that they have right now, specifically the offensive line, if you're specifically talking about the offensive line, I would say my concern level is at a 6. I don't want to say 5 because 5 is sitting on the fence. It's kind of saying 50-50. I would say a 6 because I think that at some point, if the Raiders offensive line has become or is a big problem, remember, you have the trade deadline to address it.
Yeah.
So let's say they go through week 4 or 5 and Derek Carr has been sacked 30 times already. They're going to have to sign someone or acquire an offensive lineman because you don't want to go through the season that way. So I think even if it is a problem at the beginning of the season, the Raiders have enough time and they have the resources to address that problem that they should have addressed during the summer in August. So my concern level is about a 6 right now, but I think eventually if it shows up to be a big problem and they've overestimated the players that they have, they will address it before November 1st deadline.
Look, and this is the thing too I look at, Patrick, which is Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler know more about player personnel than I do. But I think from the outside, it's just interesting because they've addressed so many issues with this team. And maybe that's it. Maybe they just haven't been able to get where they want to go. And so they're comfortable waiting on it and seeing. Now, you get your quarterback hurt, it's a different story. Nobody wants that to happen. But I think it's feast or famine. I think this offensive line could be the reason you make it, meaning that if they hold up and we see a guy like Illuminor and a guy like Dylan Parham as a rookie come in and do that, or Lester Con, whoever steps up, it could be the reason, meaning that, hey, they didn't go out and have to give up capital or pay more money. These guys just did it in-house and they took care of business. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be Pro Bowlers or anything like that, but if they can do it, then this team should make the playoffs, and there shouldn't be a question because that offense rolling full-time on all cylinders can be pretty damn good. So I agree, but it's concerning. I think you look at the outside, you just expect them to do something, especially with Dave Ziegler has been so action-oriented. When they needed something, they went and got it. In this case, they just haven't done it. So we'll see how it goes. But can they make it into the playoffs? Yes, they can. But then again, Mo, we talked about it on yesterday's show. Making the playoffs is one thing. You made the playoffs last year. You got to win in the playoffs.
Got to win. Mm-hmm.
Okay? Even if it's one game to start this regime's stay in Las Vegas, you got to get past that hump, right? You haven't gotten over that hump, And that, to me, is the hump you must get over. So great question, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Scott, do you remember Dave Ziegler's face when they asked him about the Raider team that made the playoffs last year? He was just kind of like, yeah, that's cool, that's cute, but we need to, as you said, we need to do more, and I think that's the aim, not just to get to the playoffs, but to win.
Correct. And I think if they don't win, if they make it into the playoffs and don't win, for Ziegler and McDaniels, it's like not making the playoffs. The playoffs doesn't matter. It's about progression. They made the playoffs last year with all that crap they had to go through. And if you don't progress past that with a veteran quarterback who just got a nice bump and all these weapons that you added, that's an issue. It's on them too, a little bit. So full disclosure, but I think they know this. And I think that's what's the difference with that front office now. All right, Patrick in Union City, New Jersey. Thank you, man. We appreciate your question. All right. Now we go to Christopher G in San Jose, California. He says, hey, my dudes, thanks again for a great show. Appreciate your professional approach, even if it sometimes is the truth I don't want to hear. Oh, it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, it is.
Am I just a crazy fan thinking this team could go really far in the playoffs if we stay healthy? I think the team is the best we've had since 2016 and maybe better because of the offense. I'm ready for a Super Bowl. Again, that's Christopher G in San Jose. How good could this team be, Mo, knowing the deficiencies that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, and in our last question we just answered from Patrick, and now the question from Christopher, how good could this team be?
I think he's right. I think it could be just as good, if not better, than that 2016 team, who, by the way, set the tone with that win over the Saints. So remember when we had our predictions yesterday and you said that game against the Chargers is the tone setter? There are some similarities there. If the Raiders win a close game against the Chargers in the season opener, it could remind you of that Saints win in 2016, where they felt like that was the game with Jack Del Rio, who set the tone for the season. Of course, they went on to be 12-4. So now I have them at 10-7. You have them at 11-6.
Right.
They can easily win 12 games. And I pointed out that the Colts game is a go either way game. And I think the Saints game could be a go either way game if Jameis Winston reverts back to the turnover prone quarterback that he was with the Bucs. But the way this roster is constructed, it's constructed to win now. We kind of got into a little bit in the last question. You bring in Devontae Adams, you bring in Chandler Jones, you keep Derek Carr, you give him a new salary, you give him a bump. You bring in Patrick Graham, and he brings in, I guess, his scheme, some of his guys or whatever. You're built to win now. So if you don't win double-digit games, then something is terribly wrong, and it's probably the offensive line. But if the offensive line stays healthy and all the players across the roster stay healthy at the key positions, edge, quarterback, wide receiver, linebacker, your Pro Bowl middle linebacker, Denzel Perryman, because he's had some injury issues, I'm sure you remember, with the Chargers, couldn't stay healthy with the Chargers.
Yep.
Was able to stay healthy with the Raiders, played at a Pro Bowl level. If he stays on the field, then you have a pretty good unit on both sides of the ball. So, yes, they can make the playoffs, and they can be better than that 2016 team. As you remember, it was Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper. Now it's Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and Darren Waller. I know they had Seth Roberts, but he was kind of like a clear-cut third option. Now that with their three weapons, they're all pretty special guys in different ways. So I think this team offensively is built. But one thing I will say, and the emailer pointed this out, sometimes it's who's the healthiest team at the end of the season.
Yes.
Right.
Attrition, so yeah.
Right. You can have a great roster week one, but if you don't have any depth at certain positions and guys get hurt, it's going to be a problem late in the season, because I think partially the Raiders benefited last year when they played some teams without their starting quarterbacks. We saw that. Not to say the Raiders were handed those wins, but those teams lost their quarterbacks. So the injuries kind of fell into the Raiders' favor, and it helped them get into the playoffs. So if they could stay healthy and avoid major injuries, of course, they have a chance to win 12 games and maybe win a division.
Yeah. And even the Raiders last year, Mo, I mean, look what happened to that offensive line. And I know they had some step-ins who did okay, kind of holding the spot warm, if you will. But you had the offensive line injuries and that whole kind of musical chairs up front, and then you had Darren Waller missing 6 games. So those injuries become such a huge part. You can have a really good team that completely misses the playoffs because they just don't have enough people available to keep at the level that they're capable of playing. So I think, Christopher, that they can be pretty good, and I agree. This could be, again, the best team since 2016, especially if they figure out if that offensive line on the right side gels. Then watch out, because I think this team's going to be able to put up points and put them up in a hurry. And not only that, but own the time of possession game very, very well, because they'll be able to run the ball or do short passing game, keep the clock moving, and really start to wear on their opponents. So good stuff. Christopher G. in San Jose. I appreciate the question. Okay, now we move on. We go down to Texas. Another question from El Paso. We have this is our second listener from Esteban in El Paso. And he says, ready for this, Mo? I can't believe I'm sending in a food question, but here it is. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Is a hot dog a sandwich, from Esteban in El Paso, Texas? Uh-oh, Mo.
Wow.
Your whole future could be decided on how you answer this question.
Wow. This is a good question, because I've actually saw this question before. My Twitter mentions didn't answer it. But let's first of all, let's nail down the definition of a sandwich, right? So a sandwich is something that has, I guess
meat.
You would say 2 pieces of meat and 2 pieces of bread
And
on.
for you vegans out there, I'm sorry, meat, 2 pieces of bread.
And 2 pieces of bread, right?
Right.
But to me, for it to be a sandwich, the meat has to completely, the bread has to completely cover whatever's in the middle. And with a hot dog, you have an opening, so it's not completely covered. It's kind of holding the hot dog. It's not covering it. It's kind of like a cup holder. Like you're just, you're just kind of, it's presenting the hot dog to you in this package. So I wouldn't call it a sandwich. And anyone who calls a hot dog a sandwich is probably a psycho, and I would probably not have lunch with them. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm
coming out hard on this one. If you think a hot dog is a sandwich, then yes, you are a psycho, and you need professional help. Now, Esteban didn't say, but I'm pretty sure you listen to our show, so you're not a psycho. You might be something else, but you're not a psycho. So the whole definition thing, bread with a bun, to me is not bread. Now
there you go.
Because now you could say, well, is a hoagie bread? Now, on the East Coast, people know what hoagies are. On the West Coast, they don't. Mm-hmm. Or a sub sandwich. Like you could say, well, I go get a sub sandwich, and that's kind of like a bun, because no, it's bread. It's a loaf of bread. A bun is not a loaf of bread. It does not come from a loaf of bread, right? Like you have sliced bread, that comes from a loaf. You have a sub sandwich, it's a mini loaf. Mm-hmm. So to me, it has to be, it's not a hot dog is not a sandwich.
No.
Correct. And depending where you are, you will argue what you put on your hot dog. Moe's in New York, they do mustard, right?
Even though I don't like mustard personally.
There you go. So you're a New Yorker with no mustard on your hot dog. You from Chicago, you don't put ketchup on your hot dog, right? Now on the West Coast, when I used to go down to Tijuana into Mexico, I used to get little hot dogs wrapped in bacon, which is also popular outside the Oakland Coliseum for Raider games. So hot dog is not a sandwich, Esteban. End of question. I wonder what people are going to say in the chat. If they say it's a sandwich, I don't know if they can listen anymore.
Yeah, I can't. If you're calling a hot dog a sandwich, then we just can't. We can't have lunch. We can't be friends. We can't be associates. We can't be seen anywhere close to each other in public. I'd be ashamed of you.
I'll make an admission too. When I go to, I'm a baseball guy too. I love baseball. When I go to a baseball game and I get a hot dog, do you know what I put on it?
Relish?
0. I put nothing on it. I don't know what it is. I like to eat. I like hot dogs I like relish. I like onions. I like Chicago hot dog relish. It's very bright green. But at a ball game, for some reason, I don't know if I'm in the mood, I'm in the atmosphere, I can eat the hot dog completely plain.
But you don't do that on a regular basis, do you?
No, only at ball games. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because now we saw this guy in New York what was he taking his hot dog and dipping it in the beer and all that, which I've seen before. I don't know why people thought that was so weird. I wouldn't do it. But I've seen it all over.
I've seen that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you've seen Joey Chestnut eat hot dogs, he's dipping it in water. So, why not?
Correct. Yeah, whole different ball game there. But there you go. Esteban asked a food question about hot dogs, which wasn't about whether we like them or not, because he probably listened to the last show, obviously, where you said you like hot dogs.
Yep.
So that's good. I love it. All right. Our last question is from a repeat emailer. And I mentioned this, I teased it on yesterday's show on Tuesday. And it is from Rosie. Rosie started the conversation last week with a message that said, "Hey, is it pancakes or flapjacks?" To which Mo's reaction was, "What the hell's a flapjack?" I never heard that, or you hadn't heard it from you since you were a kid, I should say.
That's correct.
And we both said it has to be pancakes, and then we talked about hotcakes too. Anyway, hey guys, Rosie again. To make it clear, she calls them. She says here, I call them pancakes. So Rosie's she's up high on the list.
She's sane. That's good. Okay.
She's sane, has all her mental faculties. Absolutely. But she says, but I have another question for you boys, which I haven't been called a boy in a long time. So thank you. Make me feel younger. What's your favorite sports movie of all time? Mine is The Replacements. So obviously football movie, which is an interesting one. I like the movie, but I wouldn't put it in my top 5. And that's Rosie in El Cajon again, which is East San Diego. What's your favorite sports movie of all time, Mr. Maurice Moten?
Wow. I'm going to go back to my childhood with this one.
Ooh.
And it's going to seem rather corny and like, what, really? Because there are so many options out there. But The Little Giants. I remember watching that. Yes. I remember that was I watched it as a kid in elementary school. And I remember being drawn to that movie for some reason. You know, because I remember being that kid who I started out as not being athletically gifted or coordinated. So I get it. Like the Little Giants is this ragtag team that, you know, going against these better players and, you know, it's a bunch of nerds or whatever. And I just remember being that nerdy, uncoordinated, non-athletic kid. And then as I got to junior high school, it changed for me because then I started playing sports and I got into sports a lot more, both football and basketball. So I was drawn to that movie because I identified with it, sort of the way I became a Raider fan. As you know, you feel like an outcast, you feel like an outlaw, and I was like, oh, this team identifies with my personality. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with this movie, Little Giants. I identify with the people in the movie.
Little Giants was released in 1994. My junior year of college.
I was 8 years old.
I know. That's why I bring it up, because I was like, man, did I take my kids to that movie? And it's like, no, it was a few years earlier than I had kids. But great movie, by the way. I love sports movies that involve kids because of the messages usually behind them, right? Including some of the funny ones. One that is really underrated, not one of my favorite sports movies all the time, but one I watch with my kids all the time, which was called Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell. I don't know if you ever saw it. Will Ferrell's in it. It's a soccer movie, which I'm not a soccer guy, but it's funny. Mike Ditka is one of the main characters in the movie. It's really funny, and worth a watch if you have kids, especially, but fun. But the sports movie thing is always hard for me because there's about 5 sports movies that I just love to death. So if I had to choose one, it's really, really tough for me. But I think I'm going to roll. Oh, God, it's tough. I'm going to say Rudy, right? Because I'm a Notre Dame guy. I love the film Rudy about this underdog kid who is nothing. And not only is he nothing, but he's a practice squad player for essence, in college, which means he'll never suit up. He'll never have a chance. And of course, that's what makes the story. And yes, the movie was embellished from the real story, but it's very close. So I love that story because of the personal side of loving Notre Dame, but also just the story of a guy who's always told he can't do it, even from his own family, which is part of the message there, which is sometimes the people close to you, even though they love you and you love them, not always the best to give you the encouragement you need, right? And it just goes to show you that if you have the conviction, you can always do what you want to do. And so you have to believe it within yourself and fight for it. So that's it. My close second, and I love all the baseball movies too, like so Field of Dreams and some of the other ones, awesome. But one of my favorite movies, you got to go back to the 70s when I was too young to watch it, and that is Slapshot, which is a hockey movie. You haven't seen it, Mo, have you?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so Slapshot, you probably know the Hanson brothers, the guys with the glasses, and Paul Newman movie, hysterical movie about hockey, minor league hockey in the 70s, just completely inappropriate in every way. I can't even really talk about much of the scenes on here, but really funny and something I really enjoyed. But the football movies in particular, Mo, I mentioned Rudy. But a Brian song, we just lost. Oh my gosh, why am I'm zoning out on the names? But we just lost the actor who played Brian Piccolo in that movie. and I can't believe I'm forgetting his name because he's in The Godfather. What am I? James Caan. Thank you. Gosh, see what happens with age. That was a great movie as well about the friendship between two guys and somebody and losing. Obviously, Brian Piccolo died. But any other football movies that pop in your head that you really enjoyed?
Not any football movies, but I have a story. I have a story time
Ooh,
with Mo really quick.
nice.
Not my favorite movie, but I remember watching Space Jam for multiple reasons. First
The
of
first
all,
one.
not
The first one.
yes, the first one, not the LeBron James
The
one.
only real
The first
one.
one,
Yes.
Michael Jordan. Yes. But I remember the movie simply because, not to bring him up, but I remember singing R. Kelly, I Believe I Can Fly as part of my graduation. We had to sing that song when I graduated from 5th grade. So that soundtrack was part of the movie. And also, that movie was the day, when I went to see it, I went on my first date when I saw that movie. I was 11.
Whoa.
Yes.
11.
My
You started
aunt,
early.
yes, my aunt brought me to the movie theater with her boyfriend's niece.
Oh,
So
double date.
it was like a double date. And they were in their 20s and I was 11 and she was older and she was 13.
Yeah, my
So it was the
man.
first time. Yeah, this was the first time I got to get that feel of being at a movie theater with a girl and talking about a movie with her one-on-one and just having one-on-one time. So that started my career in the dating field, so to speak. So Space Jam, thank you for Michael Jordan for putting out that movie. Gave me an opportunity to explore the world of dating. Appreciate that.
There you go. Some guys give girls flowers, you give them Daffy Duck. That's good. That's good. Great movie though. Another movie that you should check out, basketball movie, right? So I don't like the NBA anymore, but I love basketball. There's a movie called The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. Another late 70s movie, Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, and it stars a guy you might have heard of, Julius Erving. But also some comedic genius in there from Jonathan Winter, and just hysterical. One of my good friends and mentors, Jim Bola, who played at the University of Pittsburgh and was a coach at UNLV, was in that movie too. Jerry Tarkanian's in that movie. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's in that movie. Fantastic, funny movie about a team that's put together because they're all Pisces. And they were... They're a terrible basketball team. Then they remake their roster because they have an astrologer now who runs the team. It's really funny stuff. Just corny 70s stuff. But if you ever get a chance to watch it, it's good. But movies and sports, they go so well together. And that's why Rosie's question is so interesting. Besides what we think of them, the line between kind of life and sports is so close in so many ways that it's always lends itself because there's so many great stories of people persevering, overcoming, and accomplishing great things.
Yeah, how many times do you hit a reference like this is a storybook ending? You can make a movie out of this season that this team had. You can take a historic run, because I'm sure down the line when the Patriots are 20 years removed from their dynasty, they're going to make a movie about a team similar to the Patriots, or make a movie based on the Patriots dynasty, their run with Tom Brady. You're going to see that again. So again, parallel movies and sports always parallel. You can always turn a season into a movie or a storybook for the film. So definitely a good question there.
Yeah, and I've answered this question before on the show, not the specific question we just asked, but why haven't they made movies about the Raiders? And it's a good point. Like the Al Davis story is a great story. And then, of course, the golden age of the Raiders. I think now the reason you couldn't do it is just our current environment, our culture, whether you like it or not, to tell stories that we heard from Ken Stabler or that we've had on this show from Phil Villapiano or some of these guys. They did stuff today that is no longer considered kosher. And it's great, and the story should be told. But I can tell you that I'd rather them not make a movie if they can't tell it like it was. And so, for whatever reason, if we can't tell it like it was, I don't want a watered down version of Ken Stabler and John Matuzak. Like, I don't have any interest in that. It's got to be warts and all, or we don't get it. But it would be great. It would be a great movie. We got the documentaries, obviously, on Al Davis. But it would be great to have a movie for Raider Nation to get behind.
Yeah, I was going to say nowadays in our culture, a lot of people kind of gravitate toward documentaries now. Like there's that
Yes.
Lakers documentary that came out recently. So people would rather sit there and go on Netflix and watch a documentary than a one-off movie, because then you get a whole series of episodes and it kind of expands on it rather than cramming it into, 2 to 3 hours. They want something long form.
Yeah.
So.
Not only that, but you get the full history, the good and the bad, right? Because no matter who you are, everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, and historical figures have strengths and weaknesses. And so I think you're right. I think the documentaries give people the opportunity, but it would be entertaining to have a movie about the Raiders just for some fun, and some pro Raider Nation propaganda would be kind of cool, because it's never happened. But anyway, Rosie, thank you for the question. Okay, Mo, we got a couple minutes here left. We got to pick a winner. We had Alan about the roster question. We had Eric about the 3 reasons why or why not they make the playoffs. We had Patrick about the offensive line again. And we also had Christopher G about the team being better or as good as at least 2016. And then we had the hot dog, and we had Rosie again with the sports movie.
So I'm going to pick 2, and then I'll let you be the final vote on this. Eric, I liked his question because it kind of encapsulates, we're going into the regular season. So a lot of times I write articles about this, 3 weaknesses, 3 strengths. So maybe I'm selfish on this one, because now I'm not going to write the article because I just answered it. So people just listen to the show for my answers there. So maybe that's a little biased, but I like that question. I also like the question about, can the Raiders be better than 2016? Because what I am sick and tired of is, and I shouldn't say it's not sick and tired, but it annoys me when fans go back to 2016, and that feels like ages ago now. It's 6 years ago. Like they hark back to, 2016 it was this way. Not to say the emailer did this, but I'm hoping that the Raiders are just as good or better than 2016, because then we can kind of turn the page on that. Yes. Because a lot of time, for a while, people have been defending Derek Carr using 2016 as a reason to keep him around. Now, I wasn't one of the people that wanted him to go, but I felt like there were more reasons to defend Derek Carr, better reasons to defend Derek Carr than to go back 5-6 years to what he did in 2016 in that one playoff appearance that they had. So if they're good this year and go to the playoffs, then we can kind of finally turn the page on that year, and we can look at what they did in 2022.
And that's what I wish most for Raider Nation, is just some recency success, right? So, something that they can hang their hat on and say, okay, we're actually, as our good friend Q would say, cooking with grease.
Cooking with grease. Yes.
And so now we got it cooking now, and now we're moving. Okay, we got in the playoffs. We won a game. Now I can forget about 2016. I can even forget about 2002. Who cares? It's all about moving forward. And I agree. And plus, just think about how much the league has changed in 6 years. I mean, it's the way the game is played, the rules, everything has just changed so much. So it really is not a good comparison. But I like the question. All right, what was the second one?
Oh, the 3 reasons Raiders wouldn't make the playoffs or wouldn't make the playoffs.
Yes. Okay. Great. So that was
Eric.
I'm going to agree with that, and we're gonna give Eric, who I'm sure is watching us on YouTube right now, we're going to give Eric the T-shirt. Yes. So Eric, congratulations, man.
Long time. He has to provide his location, right? Yeah.
Yes, he's got to provide us his location. So email me. Don't put it on the YouTube chat now, because we don't want. There might be somebody in there. Might be a Chiefs fan in there just spying you. Be careful. You never know. But Eric, congratulations, man. Send that to us as well. Also, remember, we will be back tomorrow. That's right. 3 days of Mo and I in a row. Of course, you had yesterday, and you had today with the mailbag. And tomorrow we have our Thursday show. We're going to preview in depth the Charger game, what we like about this game, the matchups. We'll talk to Nick Cothrell from Sports Illustrated. He covers the Chargers, and he'll be with us to give us the latest on the team, what's going on there. And maybe we'll tap into him, Mo, too, about the whole Week 18 and the bad taste in their mouth, if you will, about the Raiders win and how much that means and kind of what we're hearing from there. We also heard that our great friend Gorilla Rilla, who was not going to be allowed to go to the game in costume, has been told he can go now. I don't know what happened, but that's good news, right? So Raider Nation can rest now. Just focus on the game.
Can't have a season opener without Gorilla Rilla in his costume. I mean, come on.
Of course not. Of course not. So that's good news. But Mo, we will talk to you tomorrow, man. We're going to get into this Week 1 matchup. I can't wait to actually talk about a football game that matters.
Yes, breaking it down week 1. Big game. Starting off with a big, huge game. I know it's not in the prime time slot, but as I said, this is a division game coming off of what happened last year with the play-in, basically, for a playoff spot. It's going to be huge. Can't wait to talk about it.
It is good. Thank you, my friend. All right. For Moe and I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black today. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your audio. And do me a favor, if you're on YouTube, right below, hit subscription and then hit that bell next to it. And also watch the video. Yes, we're suggesting another video to you. It's right here on the side. And maybe I'm pointing the wrong direction. Either side, it's there. Trust me. Click on that video. And we appreciate your support. For Moe, I'm Scott. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow on Silver and Black today. Bye-bye, everybody.